The Galactic Assembly laughed as they rejected humanity. 3 months later, human ships were disabling entire battle fleets without firing a single shot. Counselor Vexthar had presided over 17,000 applicant hearings in his 4 centuries of service, and not once, not even once, had he encountered a species quite as tragically optimistic as the humans. The application file sat before him on the projection table, glowing with that irritating blue light that all official documents seemed to emit. He flicked his forked tongue across his teeth, a habit his late mate had always found unbearably annoying, and scrolled through the human credentials with mounting amusement. "They call their homeworld dirt," he announced to the assembly chamber, his voice echoing off the crystalline walls that had witnessed a million such pronouncements. Literally, the word translates to soil, earth, ground. They named their entire planet after the substance they walk on. A ripple of chittering laughter spread through the 700 assembled counselors, representing species from 43 different galaxies. Some laughed through vocal cords, others through vibrating appendages, and a few through methods Vexthar still did not fully understand, despite centuries of diplomatic service. The Nuvare delegation, those perpetually grumpy blob creatures from Sector 9, actually jiggled with what he assumed was mirth. High Chancellor Dromak, whose crystalline form refracted light in 12 different colors when he was particularly pleased with himself, leaned forward from his elevated platform. "Please, Counselor Vexthar, do continue. I have not been this entertained since the Glorbox tried to convince us their entire civilization qualified as a single hive mind worthy of representation." Vexthar tapped the projection with one clawed finger, and the human's technological assessment materialized in the air above the assembly. Numbers, statistics, capabilities, all rendered in the standard galactic measurement system that every civilized species had adopted approximately 6,000 years before these primates had learned to control fire. "Their fastest vessel," he said, pausing for dramatic effect because even after 4 centuries he enjoyed a good dramatic pause, "requires 37 years to reach their nearest neighboring star system." 37 years. The chamber erupted into genuine guffaws now. Counselor Breen, whose species had achieved faster than light travel before developing written language, actually fell off her perch with the force of her shrieking laughter. This was going to be the easiest rejection in Vexthar's entire career, and he was absolutely going to savor every single moment of it. "Perhaps we should examine their military capabilities," suggested Counselor Breen, having finally regained her perch and her composure, though her feathers still ruffled with residual amusement. "Surely a species bold enough to apply for Galactic Assembly membership must possess formidable defenses." Vexthar obliged, pulling up the military assessment with a theatrical flourish he had perfected over the decades. "The humans have approximately 12,000 nuclear weapons, which they aim at each other, mind you, not at external threats. Their primary military strategy appears to involve throwing metal projectiles at very high speeds." "Projectiles," repeated Dromak slowly, as if testing the word for hidden meaning. "Chemical propellants, I assume." "Correct, High Chancellor. Controlled explosions that launch small pieces of lead and copper. Very impressive, if you happen to be a species that still finds rocks and sticks to be cutting-edge technology." The laughter had evolved now, transitioning from genuine surprise to something more performative. Everyone wanted to contribute their own observation, their own witty commentary, because mocking primitives was apparently the highlight of everyone's cycle. Counselor Thane, whose gaseous form swirled inside his containment suit like angry storm clouds, decided to contribute. "I reviewed their cultural development files. They still engage in something called warfare over ideological differences, not resource scarcity, mind you. Actual ideas, abstract concepts. They kill each other because they disagree about unprovable metaphysical claims." "Charming," Vexthar muttered, though he had to admit, grudgingly, that every species in this chamber had gone through similar phases. The difference, of course, was that civilized species had moved past such nonsense before attempting to join galactic society. "Motion to reject," called out Breen, clearly eager to move on to more important matters. Grounds: insufficient technological development, unstable political structures, and let us be honest, complete absence of any quality that would benefit this assembly. Seconded, added 17 voices simultaneously. Dromek raised one crystalline appendage, which was the formal signal for a vote. All in favor of rejecting humanity's application for Galactic Assembly membership, please indicate. The chamber lit up like a festival celebration, 693 counselors, signaling their approval in various species-specific ways. The 7 abstentions came from the contemplative delegation, who abstained from everything on principle, including Vexer suspected their own evolutionary development. Motion carried, Dromek announced with finality. Prepare the standard rejection notice. Category 7. Insufficient development. Recommended review period, 500 standard years, and do include the customary encouragement message about continuing to advance their civilization. Vexter drafted the rejection letter with practiced efficiency, making sure to phrase everything in that special diplomatic language that sounded encouraging, while actually meaning, please stop bothering us until you have invented something more impressive than explosive powder and bad attitudes. He transmitted the document to human space with a sense of satisfaction. His job here was done, and done well. 3 months later, Vexar was reviewing mineral distribution reports from the Outer Rim, which was exactly as boring as it sounded, when his communication console began flashing with an urgency code he had not seen in decades. Counselor Vexter came the strained voice of Observer Kelix, stationed at monitoring post 47 in what was supposed to be a quiet, uneventful sector. We have a situation that requires immediate council attention. Vextar felt his scales prickle with irritation. Observers only used urgency codes for actual emergencies, not for the usual bureaucratic nonsense that filled his days. Define situation, Observer. Sir, we have detected unauthorized vessels in Council-protected Zone Epsilon. Multiple contacts, moving at speeds that do not match any registered civilian profiles. Then they are military vessels from one of the member species. Vexter replied, already dismissing the concern. File a complaint with the appropriate delegation, and fine them for the zone violation. Standard procedure, Observer Kelix. You should know this. There was a pause, long enough that Vexer wondered if the connection had failed. Then Kelix spoke again, and this time his voice carried an edge that made Vexer sit straighter in his seat. Sir, the vessels are broadcasting human identification codes. Vexter blinked, which for his species involved 3 separate eyelids closing in sequence. That is impossible. Human vessels require decades to reach interstellar distances. We rejected their application precisely because they lack faster-than-light capability. Yes, sir. I am aware. That is why I am contacting you with an urgency code. Over the following 6 hours, reports flooded into Vexer's office with increasing frequency and decreasing coherence. Human vessels had been spotted in 7 different protected zones, all of them territories that required sophisticated jump drive technology to reach within any reasonable time frame. The ships themselves defied classification, built with materials that confused scanner readings and moving with precision that suggested either advanced automation or crew members with reaction times that bordered on precognitive. Vexter called an emergency consultation with High Chancellor Dromek, who materialized in holographic form above his desk, looking distinctly less amused than he had during the rejection hearing. Explain to me, Counselor, how a species that allegedly cannot exceed light speed has managed to establish presence in territories that would take them centuries to reach using conventional propulsion. I cannot explain it, High Chancellor, Vexer admitted, hating every word. Either our intelligence assessment was catastrophically flawed, or the humans have made technological leaps that should be physically impossible in a 3-month span. Or, Dromek said slowly, each word crystallizing in the air with ominous weight, they lied on their application. That possibility had not occurred to Vexter, mostly because no species had ever been stupid enough or audacious enough to deliberately misrepresent their capabilities to the Galactic Assembly. The penalties for such deception ranged from severe economic sanctions to complete isolation from galactic civilization. But then again, the humans had named their planet Dirt. Perhaps audacity was simply their default setting. The real chaos began when Merchant Guild Master Prelok contacted the Council in what could only be described as an absolute panic, which was remarkable considering his species communicated primarily through scent markers that typically took hours to properly compose. "They are everywhere," Prelok's translated message read, the normally flowery diplomatic language stripped down to bare panic. "Human traders have established networks in 42 systems. 42. They are offering prices we cannot match, delivery schedules we cannot meet, and goods we did not know existed." Vexthar rubbed his temples, a gesture he had picked up from watching too many human entertainment broadcasts during the application review process. "Guildmaster, surely you exaggerate. The humans were barely capable of interplanetary commerce 3 months ago. I am transmitting trade logs now, Counselor. See for yourself." The data made Vexthor's stomach, all 3 of them, perform complicated acrobatic maneuvers. Human vessels were indeed conducting trade across vast distances, moving cargo with efficiency that put the Guild's centuries-old networks to shame. They were undercutting established prices by 30%, while somehow maintaining profit margins that seemed to violate basic economic principles. Worse, they were friendly, aggressively, irritatingly, impossibly friendly. The attached communication logs showed human traders greeting shocked alien merchants with enthusiasm that bordered on weaponized cheerfulness. They learned languages within days, adapted to local customs with unnerving speed, and somehow convinced skeptical species to try something called coffee, which had apparently become the fastest-spreading trade commodity in galactic history. "Send enforcement vessels," ordered Counselor Breen during the emergency session. Vexthar had been forced to call. "Impound their ships. Find them for unauthorized trade activities. Remind them that Council space operates under Council regulations." Commander Zil, head of the Assembly's Enforcement Division, volunteered his personal squadron for the task. He was a Kraganoth, a species whose idea of negotiation involved flexing mandibles and growling until the other party reconsidered their life choices. Perfect for dealing with upstart primitives, the squadron intercepted a human merchant vessel near the Helix trade station, a moderately sized ship broadcasting identification as the Wandering Prophet under Captain Roland Torres. Vexthar watched the encounter through live feed, expecting a quick resolution. Commander Zil's flagship alone massed 3 times the human vessel, bristling with enough weaponry to sterilize a small moon. "Attention human vessel," Zil's voice boomed across all frequencies. "You are in violation of galactic trade regulations, sections 47 through 93. Power down your engines, and prepare to be boarded." The human response came back almost immediately, spoken in flawless Kragnoth dialect with an accent that suggested formal education. "Hey there, Commander. Beautiful ship you have got there. Listen, we are actually operating under independent merchant provisions. Subsection 12B, which I think you will find grants us full trading rights in unaligned systems. But I have got fresh coffee and some earth pastries if you want to discuss this over breakfast." Zil bristled. "You will comply immediately or face forcible interdiction." "Right, okay. So here is the thing," Captain Torres continued, and Vexthar could hear the smile in his voice, which should not have been possible through audio transmission alone. "My ship's point defense systems just locked onto your weapon arrays, all 47 of them. Not a threat, just letting you know. Professional courtesy, commander to commander. Now, about that coffee." The feed went silent as Zil apparently tried to process the fact that his flagship had been targeted by a vessel 1/3 its size without his sensors detecting any hostile action whatsoever. Vexthar closed his eyes, all 3 lids in sequence, and wondered when exactly his comfortable bureaucratic existence had transformed into a waking nightmare. High Chancellor Dromak was not accustomed to being challenged, questioned, or otherwise treated with anything less than absolute deference, which made his current tone of barely restrained fury all the more unsettling. "I do not care about their coffee, their pastries, or their aggressively pleasant demeanor," he announced to the assembled military council. "I care that they are operating in our space without authorization, undercutting our economy, and apparently possessing military technology that should not exist. Admiral Corthan, you will take a full battle group and remind these humans exactly how seriously we take unauthorized activities." Admiral Corthan was of Vrel, a species that had spent the last 2,000 years perfecting the art of aggressive diplomacy, which was a polite way of saying they enjoyed blowing things up and asking questions later. His battle group consisted of 47 warships, including 3 dreadnoughts that had participated in the last major galactic conflict 60 years prior. It was, by any reasonable measure, overwhelming force. Vexor watched from the observation deck as the fleet prepared for deployment, feeling a growing sense of unease that he could not quite articulate. Something about this entire situation felt wrong, like watching a predator stalk prey that had already noticed the predator and was simply waiting to see what would happen next. The battle group jumped to the Kepler Junction, a critical trade nexus where human vessels had been reported in increasing numbers. Sensors detected 17 human ships, none larger than medium freighters, all broadcasting civilian identification codes. "Attention human vessels," Admiral Corthan's message was cold, clipped, professional. "You are ordered to power down all systems and prepare for impoundment. Failure to comply will result in the use of lethal force. You have 60 seconds to respond." The response came from a vessel identifying itself as the Pacific Dawn, Captain Amelia Okonkwo commanding. Her voice was calm, almost bored. "Admiral, we have already transmitted our legal authorization for operations in this sector, independent merchant provisions, which I believe 17 of your own council members voted to approve approximately 400 years ago. We are in full compliance. Your authorization is not recognized." 50 seconds. "Okay, well, that seems like an administrative issue on your end. Tell you what, I am uploading the full legal documentation to your flagship right now. Should clear everything up." Corthan cut the transmission and ordered weapons powered. 47 warships lit up with enough destructive potential to crack a planet's crust. Targeting solutions locked onto the human vessels, which continued their leisurely trajectories as if being threatened by a battle group was a minor inconvenience rather than an existential crisis. "Fire warning shots across their bows," Corthan commanded. "Let them see we are serious." What happened next would be analyzed, debated, and taught in military academies for generations, though the consensus would never quite capture the sheer absurdity of the moment. The warning shots never reached their targets. They simply vanished, intercepted by point defense systems so sophisticated that the battle group's sensors could not track the countermeasures. One moment there were plasma bolts crossing space. The next there was empty vacuum and 17 human ships still flying in perfect formation. "Analysis," Corthan snapped. "Sir, we are detecting energy signatures that match theoretical models for 4th-generation coherent beam technology," his tactical officer reported, voice climbing an octave. "That technology does not exist, sir. The mathematics alone require computing power that would fill an entire space station. Apparently it exists enough to stop our weapons," Corthan growled. "Activate shields, charge main batteries, prepare for full bombardment." Captain Okonkwo's voice returned, still maddeningly calm. "Admiral, I really would not recommend escalating this situation. We are just trying to deliver some electronics to Helix Station. Nobody needs to get hurt over shipping schedules. Final warning, human. Surrender or be destroyed." There was a pause, a sigh, and then Okonkwo spoke again with what sounded like genuine regret. "All right then. Pacific Dawn. To all human vessels, defensive posture Delta 7. Try not to damage anything too expensive, okay? These repairs come out of our profit margins." Every human ship simultaneously lit up with targeting locks, not on the battle group's weapons or shields, but on their engine cores, life support nodes, and communication arrays. Precision targeting that should have required hours of scanning and analysis executed in less than 2 seconds. Admiral Corthan stared at his tactical display, where 47 red warning indicators showed his entire fleet had been comprehensively outmaneuvered by 17 civilian freighters. He ordered the retreat. Vexstar, watching from millions of kilometers away, finally understood the feeling of unease that had plagued him. They had not dismissed humanity. Humanity had been studying them. The humans did not request an audience with the Galactic Assembly. They did not file the proper diplomatic protocols, submit the required documentation in triplicate, or wait the customary 6-month review period. They just showed up. Vexstar was in the middle of his morning meal, consuming a perfectly prepared selection of live insects, when his console erupted with alerts that suggested either a massive systems failure or the beginning of an invasion. Given recent events, he was not entirely sure which option he preferred. "Counselor," his assistant Prill squeaked. Her tiny mammalian voice pitched high enough to shatter glass. "There is a human ship in the council chamber's restricted airspace. Security cannot get a lock on it. Shields cannot stop it. It just appeared." Vexstar abandoned his breakfast and rushed to the main assembly hall, arriving just in time to see a sleek human vessel, no larger than a diplomatic shuttle, settling onto the central platform with a grace that made their own landing technology look like controlled falling. The airlock opened with a hiss that somehow sounded smug, and 3 humans emerged wearing what Vexstar's cultural database identified as formal business attire, which apparently consisted of carefully tailored fabric and an attitude of supreme confidence. The lead human was a woman with dark hair pulled into a severe style that matched her expression. She strode to the center of the platform as if she owned it, her 2 companions flanking her with military precision disguised as casual posture. "Good morning, counselors," she said in flawless Galactic common, her accent so perfect it made Vexstar's own pronunciation sound barbaric. "My name is Ambassador Kaiko Tanaka. I represent the United Earth Coalition. We need to have a conversation about your rejection letter." High Chancellor Dromak, who had been polishing one of his crystalline facets when the humans arrived, now refracted light in colors that Vexstar associated with extreme displeasure. "This is an outrageous violation of protocol, security. Remove these intruders immediately." "Security is not coming," Tanaka replied, and she had the audacity to smile. "We put a temporary lock on the door controls. Do not worry, it will release in about 20 minutes. That should give us enough time for this discussion." "You dare," Dromak began, but Tanaka cut him off with a raised hand. "Yes, we dare. We dare quite a lot, actually. It is sort of our thing." She pulled a small device from her pocket and projected a holographic display that filled the chamber with data. 3 months ago, you rejected our application for Assembly membership. Your reasoning was that we lacked sufficient technological development, stable political structures, and anything of value to contribute. Was it though? Tanaka's smile widened. "Counselor Vexstar, your species achieved faster than light travel 400 years into your space age. The Nouvere took 600 years. The Kraganoth, bless their aggressive hearts, needed 800 years. She paused for effect. Humans achieved it in 73 years. We just did not tell you that part. You could have been honest from the beginning, Vexstar countered, though his argument sounded weak even to his own ears. Could we? Park interjected, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had considered this question extensively. Would you have believed us if we had listed our actual capabilities? Or would you have assumed we were delusional primitives inflating our accomplishments? The rejection was guaranteed the moment we came from a single planet with no existing galactic relationships. You designed a system that keeps newcomers out, then act surprised when newcomers find alternative approaches. The truth of that statement hit Vexstar like physical force. He had spent 4 centuries administering a system that claimed to welcome new civilizations while maintaining barriers that made admission nearly impossible. Every rejection had felt justified, reasonable, necessary to maintain standards. But standards for whom, exactly? High Chancellor Dromak had been silent for nearly an hour, his light refraction patterns cycling through colors Vexstar had never seen him display. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the resignation of someone who knew when he had lost. "What are your terms?" Tanaka smiled, but this time it reached her eyes. "Full voting membership, effective immediately. Trade rights equal to any other member species. Access to council databases and communication networks. Embassy establishment in the diplomatic sector." She paused, then added almost as an afterthought, "and an official apology for the Category 7 classification. That part was just rude. And, in exchange,"
Dromak asked warily,
"we share our technology advancement methodologies, establish cultural exchange programs, and promise to at least pretend we are not already planning to revolutionize 17 different sectors of galactic society." Tanaka glanced at Park, who nodded. "Oh, and we will stop intercepting your military communications. That was just us being petty after the battle group incident. You have been intercepting our secure military channels." Commander Zill, who had been quietly seething in the corner, finally exploded. "That is impossible. Our encryption is mathematically unbreakable." Park had the decency to look slightly apologetic. "Yeah, about that. Quantum computing kind of makes traditional encryption adorable. We will show you the math later. It will make you very sad." The vote was called. 647 councillors voted in favor of immediate human admission. 43 abstained, likely still processing the shock. 3 voted against, including Councillor Breen, who Vexar suspected would die before admitting she had been wrong about anything. 7 voted enthusiastically in favor, mostly species who had already started drinking coffee and had apparently decided humanity was the best thing to happen to the galaxy in centuries. Vexter cast his vote last, staring at the interface for a long moment before selecting yes. Not because he had been forced to, but because somewhere during this absolute disaster of a diplomatic incident, he had realized something important. Maybe the galaxy needed a species that named their planet Dirt and refused to follow anyone's rules but their own. Maybe they all did. 6 months after the humans had forced their way into the Galactic Assembly with all the subtlety of a supernova in a meditation chamber, Vexter found himself sitting in what had become his regular booth at an establishment called the Cosmic Bean, which was humanity's first and wildly successful venture into galactic food service. He sipped his coffee, extra dark with what the human barista called a double shot, and reflected on exactly how thoroughly his entire worldview had been demolished and reconstructed in half a standard year. The changes had come fast, faster than any bureaucracy had a right to move. But then again, humans seemed to treat bureaucratic procedures the same way they treated physics, as interesting suggestions rather than immutable laws. Ambassador Tanaka had established Earth's embassy in the diplomatic sector within 2 weeks, a process that typically took 18 months and required 47 different permits. When asked how she had managed it, she had simply smiled and said something about forgiveness being easier to obtain than permission, which Vexter now recognized as a fundamental human operating principle. The technology exchanges had been, and Vexter searched for the right word, humbling. Humans had shared advancements in medical technology that had already saved thousands of lives across 12 species. Their approach to quantum computing had caused 3 separate academic institutions to completely rewrite their curricula, and their entertainment industry. Oh, by all the ancestors, their entertainment industry had conquered the galaxy without firing a single shot. Vexter himself had become embarrassingly addicted to something called anime, which he watched in secret because admitting it would undermine what little dignity he had remaining. Councillor Breen still refused to speak to any human representative, which everyone agreed was probably for the best since her last interaction with Colonel Park had ended with her rage molting in the middle of the assembly chamber. The janitor was still finding feathers in air vents. High Chancellor Dromak had adapted with surprising grace, though Vextar suspected it had less to do with flexibility and more to do with the fact that human scientists had solved a crystalline degradation problem his species had struggled with for generations. Nothing promoted acceptance quite like no longer facing a slow, inevitable deterioration of one's physical form. The Merchant Guild had initially collapsed into chaos when human trade networks had expanded exponentially, but then something unexpected happened. Humans started partnering with existing merchants, sharing logistics technology, teaching optimization algorithms that should have taken decades to develop. Merchant Guild Master Praluk now co-chaired a joint trade commission with Captain Torres, and they had apparently become close friends, bonding over something called spreadsheet optimization, which sounded horrifying. Admiral Chen had been invited to lecture at the War College, where she had spent 3 hours explaining human military doctrine to an audience of experienced officers who had left the presentation looking vaguely traumatized. Her core message, as Vexter understood it, was that humans had spent their entire history fighting each other and had gotten terrifyingly good at it. Galactic species had enjoyed millennia of relative peace. Humans had enjoyed approximately 15 minutes between conflicts and had spent those 15 minutes preparing for the next one. Commander Zill had requested a transfer to a remote observation post, citing personal reasons. Everyone knew the actual reason was that he could not handle the embarrassment of having been outmaneuvered by civilian freighters. The coffee shop around Vexer buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages. A Nouvere engineer debated quantum mechanics with a human physicist. 3 Kragnoth warriors laughed over something displayed on a human tablet. A group of young diplomats from 6 different species practiced what appeared to be a human card game called poker, which Tanaka had warned him was actually a masterclass in reading body language and calculated deception. This was integration, Vexter realized, not the sterile procedural process the assembly had always imagined, but this messy, chaotic, surprisingly functional blending of cultures that happened when you stopped trying to control everything and just let people connect. His console chimed with a message from the council chambers. Another species had submitted an application for membership, a young civilization from the Andromeda region. The preliminary assessment suggested they were technologically primitive, politically unstable, and offered little obvious value to galactic society. Standard Category 7 rejection, according to traditional criteria. Vexstar read through the application more carefully this time, looking past the surface statistics to the details underneath. They had art, music, complex social structures, and a space program that showed creativity if not sophistication. They had named their star Hope, which seemed unnecessarily optimistic but also kind of charming. He drafted his recommendation, provisional acceptance, pending cultural exchange program and technology sharing partnership. If the humans had taught him anything, and they had taught him far too many things for his comfort, it was that potential mattered more than current capability. That audacity was not always a flaw, that sometimes the species you dismissed as primitive had simply been waiting for the right moment to prove you magnificently, catastrophically wrong. The Galactic Assembly had rejected humanity, filed them away as insufficient, inadequate, unworthy of consideration. That had been their first mistake. Their second mistake had been assuming humans would accept that rejection and quietly fade into obscurity. Their third mistake, and this one still kept Vexer awake some nights, had been not realizing that humanity had let them make those mistakes on purpose. Every underestimation, every dismissal, every condescending comment had been carefully noted and strategically exploited. Humans did not just play the game. They rewrote the rules while everyone else was still reading the instruction manual. Vexter finished his coffee, left payment plus the customary human tip that he had finally learned to calculate correctly, and headed back to his office. He had an application to champion, a system to continue reforming, and probably another human innovation to adapt to by the end of the week. The galaxy had spent millennia believing it had everything figured out, that its systems were perfect, its standards absolute, its superiority unquestionable. Then humanity had shown up and politely, cheerfully, relentlessly proven that the only thing more dangerous than a species with advanced technology was a species with advanced technology and absolutely no respect for how things had always been done. Vexter would not have it any other way, though he still wished they had not named their planet Dirt. That part remained objectively hilarious, and no amount of cultural understanding would ever change his mind about it. Some things were just funny, regardless of how advanced your civilization became. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most human lesson of all.